Well, hello there. It's been a little while since we've done a Grey Matters video. My apologies for that. We've had a lot going on. We've been away for a little bit with the caravan. I've had some building projects at home and lots of family commitments. So it's taken a little time to get back in front of the camera. But hopefully we're going to keep some content coming for you now. We've got a few things lined up that we think you'll enjoy. The second thing to note is that my camera has broken. I think it's broken. It'll only record for about 30 seconds and then switches off, and that's even with new batteries in, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. So I've had to revert to my phone, I'm afraid, and this does have a tendency to try and autofocus all the time, so you may notice the image flicking in and out, which I find incredibly annoying, but I apologise if that's the case today. So, Alaska. The long-awaited Alaska travel video. You know, to cruise along the Alaskan coastline, which is incredibly rugged. With it, there's glaciers and there's little communities dotted around. There's ice floes. There's so much to see. It's absolutely fantastic. And there's so much that we've seen that we've actually done it twice now, because of the variety of things to see. A friend of mine who's Scottish, he said as we went on the first cruise up there, he looked and he went, threes, churches, just like Scotland. But there is a lot more to it than that. So I think we're probably pretty well placed to suggest 8 really good things you can do when you cruise Alaska. Welcome to Grey Matters. Welcome to Grey Matters, the channel that promotes the fact that the older generation still matters and looks at issues that matter to the older generation. Now, if you like what you see, please give it a thumbs up. Do consider subscribing, and if you do subscribe, don't forget to hit that notification bell, otherwise you won't be kept in touch with our latest content. Now, Alaska. It doesn't really matter what time of year you choose to cruise Alaska. If you go in the summer, there'll still be a bit of snow about, there'll still be some ice floes. You've still got the glaciers to visit, and in fact the glaciers will be calving a lot more. That's where bits break off, which is quite spectacular, and you get to see that quite close up from the cruise ship. There is of course a downside to calving, and we will talk about that a little bit later on in the video. Now, if you choose to go in the winter, there's obviously going to be a lot more snow about, and it is quite spectacular to see Alaska in winter. It's just like nothing else on earth. It's amazing. So either time of year, there's plenty to see and do, and it'll be well worth the trip whenever you choose to go. Now, what are the 8 things that we would recommend doing? And in no particular order. The first 4 are in the capital, Juneau, and most of the cruise ships will stop at Juneau. So the first thing to do is, from the harbour, take the cable car up to the top of the mountain that's there. Now, when you're at the top, there is a sky bridge for you to get some spectacular views down to the harbour and across the landscapes.
Right now, we are en route to Shaw-a-Hit, which is a clincher word for the mountain house, where we will then unload onto our sky bridge. On our sky bridge, we do have windows all around the perimeter for you to enjoy the panoramic view of Juneau, Alaska. Also, to get those picture-perfect moments. We have the Nature Center, who can give you any additional information about our trails conditions, as well as any safety tips. Also, information regarding the plants and animals you may or may not encounter here in Alaska.
And there's a few other attractions up there. There's some walks you can take on the bear trails. Now, you might see some bears if you're really lucky. Just be aware, though, that you shouldn't startle a bear. You don't want to creep up on it. And what they recommend is some bells that you wear on your boots. And then as you walk along, you jingle along, and the bears will hear you coming and they will run away. My argument against that is that a bell is the international sound for dinner. And if you think I'm giving that sound to a bear who might be hungry, you've got nothing coming. But that leads us to the second thing you can do, and that's to visit the Raptor Centre. Nothing to do with Jurassic Park. Raptors, as you probably know, is the generic term for birds of prey. And they have lots up there, particularly bald eagles. And it was there that we met a bald eagle called Lady Baltimore. She had been shot by hunters. She'd been blinded in one eye, and she had problems with her navigation and muscular flight control. And it meant that if she did fly, she would keep flying until she crashed into something. She couldn't perceive depth, she couldn't control the way she flew, and she couldn't land. So they couldn't let her fly free and hunt her own food. She could never be released back into the wild. So I took some photos of her, which she was just such a beautiful bird, and I eventually did a watercolour painting from one of those photographs. She's still there. If you get a chance, go and have a look at the bald eagles and the other birds of prey who are getting rehabilitated there. Now, our third pick for Juneau is to visit the Red Dog Saloon. Now, this isn't to be missed. This is a real spit and sawdust saloon. Typical Wild West. The saloon girls they're dressed in the old Western saloon girl type costumes. They have someone playing the honky-tonk piano with some sing-along songs and so on.
Oh, yes, sirree. We have Australians in here. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. You know the difference between an Australian and a canoe? A canoe tips. Piano player in Australia made $150 an hour, you know. Chicago, nice folks from Chicago. Well, on the south side.
The food there is fantastic. If you're a vegetarian, not so much choice, but if you like fish and ribs, there's plenty there for you. And it's one of those places that you see in the films where you finish your pint, you just throw some notes onto the bar and you walk out. It's just a brilliant experience. I would normally be wearing the t-shirt for Red Dog Saloon, but I forgot. So sorry about that, but you can pick up t-shirts. It's a great place, great atmosphere.
And finally, number 4 of our 8 things to do when cruising Alaska is in Juneau still, and that's a trip to the Medinal Glacier. Now, I believe you can go from other locations too. We went from Juneau, and it's either a sort of 10-12 minute helicopter flight, or it's about a 20-minute trip by road. We went by helicopter, and it was amazing that the trip in the helicopter alone was worth the money. We went with 1 or 2 other helicopters, and we flew in formation through the valleys and the mountains, a bit like a scene from MASH, if you remember that series. It was incredible. Apocalypse Now, without the music. We landed on the glacier, where we were met by a glaciologist. We had the proper glacier boots on to protect ourselves as well as protecting the glacier. Now, the first thing you'll notice when you land on most glaciers is that it's not as pristine and blue and as lovely as you think. It appears to be quite dirty. And the reason for that is this dust that's embedded within the glacier. It's not just dust, it's granite. This unstoppable force of a glacier, as it winds its way down, it carves its way down to the sea, is grinding up the glacier rock around, the granite. Can you imagine the force it takes to grind granite to a dust? But that's what it is. There are some rules you need to follow. First of all, you mustn't run, because it's very easy to fall over or fall down a hole. It might look smooth, but in fact it's very craggy, very rocky. The other thing you mustn't do is drink the water. It looks very inviting, there's puddles of water, but it's so full of minerals that it'll make you quite ill. The other thing to be aware of is scale. The glaciologist, when we arrived, pointed out these little bushes on a nearby hillside. In fact, they were 50-foot elder trees on the side of the mountain. There is no scale. And that is dangerous. And one of the things you must not do is wander away from the group, because you might think you're just going to wander over to a nearby hillside, and in fact it's a couple of miles away. It's astonishing. It's an optical illusion, and you need to be very aware of that. And of course, we had someone on our group who wandered off, had to be called back for his own safety. He ran and fell over a few times, and he drank the water. What can you say? There's always one. You do learn a lot from a glaciologist about how they're formed, how they move, the history of that particular glacier that you're on. If you can get a trip to any of the glaciers, it's really, really worthwhile. So stick that on your Alaskan bucket list. So number 5 of the things to do when you're cruising Alaska is whale watching. Fairly obvious, and I'm sure most people will do that when they get the chance. We were at a place called Icy Strait Point, and we disembarked the cruise ship, got onto our little boat that was going to take us out, and a pod of humpback whales came in to the harbour. Very rare. And we were able to just follow them out. Instead of having to go hunting for whales, they came and found us. Now, the boats aren't allowed to interact with them. You've got to stand off a certain distance so as not to interfere with their breeding and feeding habits. But if they come to you, that's a different matter. And they did come quite close. They also met another school of whales that they were circling each other, determining if they were friends or foe, because there's quite a lot of competition for the food there. But it's amazing. When you see the water spouts, it's this mist, and it curls, and it looks ghostly. And you can see why ancient mariners thought they could see spirits and ghosts at sea, when it was actually these whales and their blowholes. They're just amazing, amazing. So do get it, if you get the chance, do go whale watching. Number 6 is at Skagway. What a great name for a place. And that is dog sledding and going on the White Pass Railway. Now, you can do dog sledding from different locations, so it depends where you are, obviously, but do see if you can get out there on a dog sled. Again, depends on the time of year, what your experience will be like. We were in the summer, spring, summer, I believe, so there wasn't any snow about at the campsite for the sled dogs. So they use wheeled sleds, and you get a team of 20 dogs pulling you. It's phenomenal. It's a thrill ride. But you also learn about the huskies, you learn about how they are looked after, the fact that they absolutely live for pulling those sleds. They're champing at the bit, literally, to get going. And they talk about the Iditarod race, the Trans-Alaskan Husky race. I don't know how often it occurs, but some of the dogs in these camps will run in that incredible race. Well worth a trip if you can, just to learn about sledging and how the dogs are looked after. The other thing I mentioned was, of course, the White Pass Railway. Now this is great fun. You get 2 very powerful heavy diesel locomotives pulling vintage railroad stock up a mountain, and it takes those 2 to get up. It's a single track railway, so it's there and back on the same track. It lasts an hour and a bit probably, but you see some fantastic scenery, and you also go over some rather rickety looking bridges, the kind you see in the westerns that they will blow up with dynamite, and one of them looks like that's exactly what's happened to it, and that one's been closed off. New bridges have been put in. It's a great experience, and the staff on the train are fantastic. The brakeman, the guard, and all the staff on there are really attentive and informative too, if you want to know anything about the train or what you're seeing.
So what is the brakeman's job? Sounds obvious maybe, but...
Yeah, it used to be.
Right.
Back in the days before air brakes, the guys would go through car to car and turn these handbrakes on.
Oh, right.
So it's a really old job title, even though the job has changed quite a bit. Nowadays, the brakeman is basically just an assistant conductor.
That's all.
They were live when they said it gets cold here.
So that's a really good one, the White Pass Railway. Number 7, we're back to the glaciers. Most of these cruise ships will visit the glacier, at least one glacier. Quite often it's the Hubbard or the Marjorie glaciers. The captain will try and get the ship as close to the glacier as he can, so you get a good view. Now again, sense of scale. It might not look that huge until you see a little boat go past. These glaciers are around 200 feet or more, maybe 300 feet tall. And what everyone hopes to see is the glacier carving, and that's when huge lumps of the glacier fall off and into the sea. Now when that happens, there is a crack like thunder, and then this roar as it falls off the glacier, hits the water, and a tidal wave will come out. Obviously they're not always big chunks. Sometimes it's just a small rock fall, sometimes just small parts breaking away from the glacier. It is spectacular to see, but I mentioned earlier a downside, and that's really global warming. Obviously they carve more in the summer, but they're carving a lot more in the winter as well now because of the ambient temperatures have risen. So while it's spectacular, it is also a bit of a warning to us that we are causing problems. Global warming is causing problems. We know it's affecting the food chain for polar bears, and it is a worry, no doubt about it. But don't feel guilty when you're watching these glaciers carving. Don't stand there and feel, oh, I shouldn't be watching it. Don't feel guilty about it, because it's going to happen. It's going to happen anyway. Without global warming, carving happens. So enjoy the spectacle, because it really is worth seeing. It's quite exciting. So that's glacier watching from the ship. Really good experience. Our 8th one is at Ketchikan. Now it's often the last port of call for a cruise ship before it goes back to Vancouver or wherever it may have sailed from. Ketchikan has got a salmon fishery there, which is quite interesting to see the salmon spawning up the rivers if you're there at the right time of year. But I think the main attraction there is the Lumberjack Show. It's a family-run business, professional lumberjacks, and there's axe throwing. And log rolling and climbing up totems and chopping things down. A lot of competition, a lot of people getting wet. And it is great fun. It's a huge entertainment and tremendous skill involved. Just go and see it. It is really good fun. That's the Lumberjack Show at Ketchikan. That's our selection of 8 things to do when you're cruising Alaska. The opportunities for doing any of those obviously depends on your cruise itinerary. Check that out in advance. Some of the experiences are worth booking back in the UK before you go. We booked the Medinal Glacier and the dog sledding before we left. It was cheaper. So do check out those prices and see what you can book in the UK before you go. What did we love? The first time we went, it was with Celebrity, which is a top-end cruise line. The food was fantastic. Standing on the deck with the snow blowing around you, drinking some hot chocolate laced with brandy, can't beat it. I believe we also had hot rolls hollowed out filled with soup, which we were eating on there. I mean, brilliant. And generally the ambience on board the ship and the entertainment is fantastic. What didn't we like? On the second trip, it was the cruise ship. We went with Holland America. The food was okay. It looked nice, but it wasn't brilliant, to be fair. And there was no atmosphere on the ship. And the reason for that is that they booked a 1,000-strong Christian group for that particular trip who were there for seminars. Now, normally at meal times, for example, people go over a period of 2 hours to eat their meals. When you have a 1,000-strong group of people released from a seminar all at the same time, who all go to eat at the same time, there is no room for anybody else. In the evenings, the dining rooms were empty because these people worked on into the evenings. So because there was no one there, the restaurants were half full, there was no atmosphere. Even on the formal night when we're all done up with the bow ties and everything, it all felt a bit flat because there was just no one about. And the same in the theatre. You've got these acts who have worked their socks off to produce a show, and you've got a theatre that's maybe half full, and it felt flat. It fell flat for them. And we felt quite sorry for them. So there's those two aspects. It's either too crowded or it's too empty. And I know a lot of passengers were displaced with various degrees of compensation to make room for this group. Not the best experience, and I would seriously suggest whichever cruise line you book with, just check if the cruise that you're actually interested in, see if they've taken any large block bookings, and if they had, avoid it like the plague. Avoid it like the plague. So there we go. Thanks for joining us. That is our look at 8 top things to do in Alaska. We'd love to hear your experiences, particularly if you've booked on a ship that's had a large group of people booked in as well. How did it affect your cruise? Have you sailed with Celebrity? Have you sailed with Holland America? What were your experiences? Were they the same or different to ours? We'd love to know what your views are on that. So do leave some comments below. We've got some good content coming up in the near future. I hope to, at long last, interview Karen Nicolau, who owns and runs the Aspects of Beauty salon in Colchester. And we're going to be looking at skincare regimes, routines, and makeup for the older generation. Some of you ladies, and maybe men, will have been following the same skincare routine since you were in your teens, and things change, your faces change, the elasticity of your skin changes, and maybe you need to look at something new. So we're going to be chatting to Karen about skincare regimes and how you can make yourself look and feel maybe that little bit younger too, which would be great for some of us. I could do with it, I know. Hopefully we still got to get together with Jess and chat about growing old, because there's an awful lot to chat about in that. And don't forget to like and subscribe if that's your boat, floats your boat, pun intended. And we will see you next time on Grey Matters. Thank you, bye for now.